Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099 and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the 2008-2009 miniseries The Age of the Sentry. I know a lot of people really hated the character of the Sentry. I think most of that hatred can be traced back to Brian Michael Bendis using the character extensively during his run on New Avengers. I think most of the people who really hated this character, they were not aware of the original Paul Jenkins J. Lee miniseries from, I don't know, 2001. And whenever I talk to people about the Sentry, usually they just talk about how much they hate the character in the Avengers. This is a book that I would recommend to just about anyone, whether you hated the Sentry or really didn't care one way or another, or if you like the Sentry. I would recommend this book to you people. If you are a fan of the Silver Age Superman stories, for example, the ones where Superman would get married to an alien and he would have to try and get out of it, if you are a fan of those kinds of stories, this is the book for you. It's basically Silver Age Superman with Marvel characters. This sort of thing is not exactly new. I know the original Paul Jenkins J. Lee miniseries had a little bit of this, where they were kind of trying to do Superman through the lens of Marvel Comics, so you were seeing different eras of the Sentry. This book is basically that in its entirety. The entire book is basically that. And also, if you are a fan of Alan Moore or Image Comics, you've probably seen this sort of thing before. Alan Moore had a pretty lengthy run on the Rob Liefeld character Supreme, basically doing the exact same thing that this book is doing, although he took quite a bit more room to do what he did. Basically, that run was Alan Moore kind of taking the Silver Age Superman and reviving it in the form of Supreme. This is sort of doing the same thing, although in the span of 6 issues instead of 18 issues, or however long that Moore was on that title. One thing I really loved about this book, I've talked about this plenty of times before, I really like it when a comic book series can manage to make each individual issue be a standalone issue, and you don't have to read 5 or 6 other issues in order to really understand the story that's going on. Every issue of this series, except for the final issue, has 2 complete stories in each issue. That blew my mind because you don't see that anymore. You don't even see one issue that has 1 complete story in it, let alone 2 stories in it. I really enjoyed that this managed to have 5 issues with 10 stories in it, and all the stories basically stand on their own. The final issue is 1 story in that whole issue, and it's sort of the culmination of a bunch of little subplots that have been building throughout the other 5 issues. I'm a little iffy on how this series ends, so there is going to be a little bit of spoilers in this video. If you want to go ahead and read the book, you might want to go ahead and turn this video off because I am about to spoil some stuff. The first 3 issues of this book are basically taking the Sentry and dropping him somewhere in the early days of Marvel Comics, around the early 1960s, and it's basically imaginary stories that could, in theory, have taken place in the early days of Marvel Comics. Around issue 4, things start to be a little bit different. We get a reference to Commissioner Murdoch, and that is Matt Murdock, Daredevil. And the weird thing is, Matt Murdock, as far as I know, has never been a commissioner. He has always just been a normal defense attorney. And then in the second half of issue 4, the Sentry goes and joins the Guardians of the Galaxy, and over half of the team members on that team are not originally members of the Guardians of the Galaxy. For example, one character, I think he is called the Immortal, he is basically Wolverine. If you see the panel, you know, okay, that is definitely Wolverine, and you even hear the snicket sound. But Wolverine was never a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's this really weird thing where I feel like this book is trying to do one thing or the other, and it can't exactly figure out what it wants to do. I would prefer it if this book from the beginning had all of these anachronisms and it could really explore the idea of this alternate Marvel universe. For example, a world where the Avengers are led by the Blonde Phantom, or Wolverine is a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, or Matt Murdock is a commissioner. I would be fine with that if that was present from the beginning. But it feels like this book really didn't know that it was going to do that until issue 4, and then it starts throwing these things at us, and it feels a little strange when in the first half of this book it feels like you are taking the Sentry and dropping him in the Silver Age of Marvel Comics that we actually got, and not some imaginary kind of sort of Silver Age that is very similar but has a few differences. I'm not saying I have a problem with the last half of this miniseries where we have some of these differences. I just wish if we were going to have these things in this book that it had done this from the beginning. Or don't do any of them and just have the entire book be very much similar to the Silver Age of Marvel Comics, just with the Sentry in it. There are a few scenes in this book. I don't remember exactly how many times it happens. It's not every issue, but it's almost every issue. In these scenes, the Sentry will space out, and suddenly he's in an entirely different place, and then he's back to where he was, and whoever he's hanging out with is saying, "Hey, Sentry, are you okay?" And he's like, yeah, I'm fine." And at one point in this book, when he spaces out, he suddenly starts pointing directly at the audience, and he says, "They are not supposed to be here. They are not supposed to be here." I think that's what he's saying. He's either saying they are not supposed to be here, or he is not supposed to be here. Ultimately, this doesn't play out at all. This is never referenced again. I have no idea if this is meant to be a sort of meta thing where the comic book characters are aware of the audience or aware of the writer of the book. I have no idea. If this was that sort of thing, again, I wish that it was doing that sort of thing throughout the entire book and not just in this one little panel and then never to be referenced again. This is a little bit of a problem. It's never referenced again in the rest of the book. The final issue is kind of this big, huge retcon of the Sentry's origin story, and I don't think that it even references he is not supposed to be here. Unless the Sentry is referring to the Void, his arch enemy, I don't think that it's really referenced again. And for me, anyway, that is a problem. Maybe for other people, that's not a problem, but it would be like if in a movie that you're watching, a 10-minute interlude happens and the interlude is never referenced again. It's about like that. It's really a non sequitur. It makes no kind of sense. If you took it out of this book, you would not even notice that it was gone. It's one of those things, it has no purpose being in this story. Like I mentioned, the last issue of this book is basically a huge retcon on the Sentry's origin stories, which, since the Sentry himself is a giant retcon on the Marvel Universe, I imagine nobody is really going to be very disappointed that this is resorting to retcons on the character's history. Basically, in the Paul Jenkins J. Lee miniseries, we find out that this little boy, Robbie Reynolds, he drinks a potion that's in this secret laboratory and he becomes the Sentry. And that origin is sort of kept intact here, but there's more added to it. We find out that the potion didn't really have anything to do with Robbie getting his powers, and it was actually an energy being from another universe who was bonding to Robbie at that exact moment that he got his powers. It's really strange. The potion is sort of connected to the Captain America Super Soldier Project. I'm still not entirely sure if the potion actually had an effect on Robbie, or if it was just the energy being from another universe giving Robbie his powers. The issue ends with the Sentry dying trying to protect the universe or the city or something, and then the Void, he basically takes over as the Sentry. I'm not entirely sure how this fits in with the rest of the Sentry's appearances in the Marvel Universe. The Sentry from the very beginning was always meant to be a dichotomous hero. He has a very good half and a very evil half, but he is half and half. This book, I guess, kind of retcons that, as from the very beginning, at least according to this, he was always just a good hero and the Void was a separate entity, and then later the Void, I guess, takes over for him. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. This book, I guess, tries to cover for that in the sense that it ends up being Reed Richards is telling all of these stories to Franklin Richards, his son. So I guess this book is saying if there are any inconsistencies within this story, that's because Reed Richards is tired and he's just telling a story to his son, and it's not an actual story of the Marvel Universe. Okay, fine, but I would rather there not be any inconsistencies. I don't mind the framing device of the Fantastic Four telling the story to Franklin Richards, but I would rather the story actually make sense and be coherent and not have all of these inconsistencies in it. I don't necessarily mean that this is inconsistent with the Paul Jenkins J. Lee story, although it is. I mean that within the context of this book, there are inconsistencies with itself, and I feel like these things could have been worked out a little better, and it could have been overall a better story, and you wouldn't need the framing device as an excuse for why there are inconsistencies. You could still have the framing device, you just wouldn't need it to explain why this part of the book is inconsistent with that part of the book. Overall, I know it may sound like I didn't exactly love this book. I actually really enjoyed it. I think anybody should read this. If not for your love of the Sentry or lack of love for the Sentry, I think this feels like a classic Silver Age story. And I personally, for the most part, really like the Silver Age. It's a period where there was a lot of inventiveness going on, and I think this really captures that really well. And it made me excited to be reading a comic book, which far too often that does not happen. Usually when I'm reading a comic book, I'm not enjoying it for one reason or another, and I really did enjoy this book. And that's about all I have to say here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with some other kind of video. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.